Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Imagine this, you put down a 2 billion VND deposit to buy a house. The contract clearly states, if the seller fails to transfer the title after 30 days, they must return your 2 billion deposit and pay a penalty of another 2 billion. Moving forward to the deadline, the seller is late. You take them to court demanding 4 billion VND. Both instance and appellate courts agree with you, and you're certain you've won. However, in a sudden turn of events, the Supreme Court overturns the situation. Why did this happen? In this video, I will analyze a real-life real estate case involving a 2 billion VND deposit and the dispute over whether a seller must pay a penalty when the delay is caused by objective factors. To begin with, let's look at the overview of this dispute. This case arises from a deposit contract for a residential house. The central legal issue here isn't just the breach of the contract deadline. More importantly, it's about determining fault. In other words, this isn't a simple story. If you are late, you are fined. Instead, the real question is, was the failure to perform the obligation due to the seller's fault or due to objective causes? Let's look at the facts. Back in May 2009, Mr. L and Ms. H signed a deposit contract for a house in Ho Chi Minh City. According to the agreement, Mr. L placed a deposit of 2 billion VND. Within 30 days, Ms. H was required to complete the title transfer and sign the notarized sales contract. If she violated this timeline, she had to pay a penalty equal to the deposit, meaning an additional 2 billion VND. Unfortunately, when the deadline passed, Ms. H could not complete the title transfer, making it impossible for the parties to sign the official contract. Consequently, Mr. L filed a lawsuit requesting the return of his 2 billion VND deposit and the payment of the 2 billion VND penalty, totaling 4 billion VND. Now, let's examine both sides of the argument. On one hand, Mr. L argued that the timeline in the contract was clearly agreed upon. Since Ms. S failed to meet her commitment, she must be held liable for the penalty as strictly stated in the contract. On the other hand, Ms. S admitted the delay but offered a different explanation. She claimed the delay was caused by the Civil Judgment Enforcement Agency being slow to transfer the title. Because this was an objective cause and not her fault, she only agreed to return the deposit and refused to pay the penalty. So, how did the courts initially react? The first instance and appellate courts both took a strict view. They ruled that Ms. S had indeed violated her obligation to perform on time. They found the penalty clause to be legal and valid. As a result, both courts accepted Mr. L's request and ordered Ms. S to pay the 2 billion deposit plus the 2 billion penalty. Unsurprisingly, Ms. S did not accept these decisions. She insisted there was no subjective fault on her part. She had bought the house through an auction from the enforcement agency, and the delay was their fault, not a result of her being lazy or deceitful. To support her claim, Ms. H presented a crucial piece of evidence, an official letter from the Department of Civil Judgment Enforcement explaining that the delay was due to a complaint from a third party regarding the previous owner. This is exactly where the concept of objective fault comes into play. Finally, let's look at the turning point, when the case was reviewed under special procedures. A higher court took a completely different approach. The court emphasized that you cannot apply a deposit penalty based solely on the fact that a deadline was missed. It is essential to verify the root cause of the delay. Specifically, if the delay in transferring the title is due to objective reasons, such as delays by a government agency, then the seller is not at fault and should not have to pay the penalty. A penalty can only be applied if the delay stems from the subjective fault of the seller. In this specific case, the lower courts were found to have lacked sufficient legal grounds because they ordered the penalty without clarifying the elements of fault. To wrap things up, this case leaves us with a very important golden rule. In deposit contract disputes, penalties should not be applied mechanically. Instead, they depend heavily on the element of fault. The court must look beyond just whether a violation occurred and determine why it happened in the first place. Thanks for watching. If you found this legal analysis helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more case law insights. See you in the next video.